Judge Walter Grayson assumed today would be routine. Another troubled teen? Another conviction? He barely looked up when they brought in the defendant, just a 19-year-old standing quietly beside the defense table, hands tucked into his pockets like he had nothing to prove. But that illusion didn't last long. Inside the courtroom, the tension was almost physical. The air hung heavy between the walls of the Los Angeles County Courthouse. Rows of spectators whispered, half curious, half bored, unaware that something different was about to happen. Yolan Dawson stood calmly, not defiant, but composed, his chin raised just enough to say, "I'm not afraid of any of you." The charges were serious: grand theft auto and resisting arrest. The consequences could be life-changing. Yet Yolan stood like someone who'd been here before, not as a defendant, but as someone who understood this room better than those who worked in it. Judge Grayson watched him with cool detachment, fingers tapping rhythmically against the polished wood of his bench. Then, a small, amused twist of his lips. "You think this is a classroom debate, son?" His voice dripped with condescension. "This is real life." A few people chuckled. The bailiff smirked. The prosecutor, Mitchell Carrington, glanced up from his files with a look that said this would be quick. Even the stenographer allowed herself a half smile. But Yolan, he didn't flinch. He wasn't new to this feeling. For most of his life, he'd studied courtrooms like other kids studied sports. While his friends were memorizing player stats, Yolan was analyzing trial transcripts. While they played video games, he practiced mock openings and cross-examinations in his head. His mother, Denise Dawson, a career paralegal, used to vent after work about shady prosecutors, lazy defenders, and judges who decided verdicts before hearing the case. Yolan had soaked it all in. By 14, he could break down a trial better than most first-year law students, but Judge Grayson didn't see any of that. To him, Yolan was just another name in a stack of files. "Let's move this along," the judge muttered, flipping the folder open. "I've got a tea time at 2. That got another round of laughter. Yolan almost smiled. Almost. Because right there Grayson had made his first mistake. Not in the law, but in underestimating who was standing before him. The prosecutor rose with the quiet confidence of a man who's never questioned his own authority. Carrington's suit was pressed to perfection, his tie symmetrical, and his voice polished with rehearsed certainty. "Your Honor, the state will prove without a shadow of a doubt that the defendant, Yolan Dawson, was apprehended while operating a stolen 2022 Audi A6. The vehicle was reported missing earlier that day. When officers located it, he attempted to flee. His fingerprints were found on the steering wheel. The facts are undeniable." People in the gallery shifted, whispering. The evidence on the surface was solid. A stolen car, a pursuit, an arrest. Carrington added, "Officer Daniel Ruiz personally witnessed the defendant behind the wheel. The arrest followed proper procedure. There is no ambiguity here." Judge Grayson leaned forward slightly, resting his chin on his hand. "Sounds straightforward," he murmured, and maybe to most in that courtroom, it did. But not to Yolan. He saw the holes, the inconsistencies. He knew where the questions should have been asked, but he waited, still, silent. Grayson tapped his gavel lightly. "Let's hear from the defense." All eyes turned to the corner of the room, where a nervous-looking public defender, Rosalie Thornton. She adjusted her blazer and tried to speak. "Your Honor, my client." Yolan raised a hand, gently touching her arm. She paused, then sat back down. "I'll be speaking for myself, Your Honor," Yolan said, his voice even and clear. Room froze. "What?" the judge asked, brows raised in disbelief. "I'll be defending myself," Yolan repeated, without a tremor in his tone. Someone near the back let out a low whistle. The bailiff looked confused. Carrington laughed, short and sharp. "Well, this just got entertaining," he muttered, but the laughter didn't last long, because the way Yolan stepped forward, measured, unshaken, shifted something in the air. His hands stayed in his pockets. He paused just long enough to let the silence grow uncomfortable, and then he began to speak. "Your Honor, before I begin," Yolan said, his voice calm but clear enough to carry through the courtroom, "I'd like to clarify something with the prosecution." Carrington tilted his head slightly, folding his arms with practiced arrogance. "By all means." Yolan took one deliberate step forward, locking eyes with him. "You stated that Officer Daniel Ruiz personally witnessed me in the driver's seat before I was taken into custody." "That's accurate." Carrington let out a short breath, already sounding bored. "That's what's written in his report." "Yes." Yolan gave a thoughtful nod, then slowly turned to Judge Grayson. "Your Honor, I'm requesting that this piece of testimony be struck from the record." The judge squinted at him, intrigued but skeptical. "On what basis?" For the first time, Yolan removed his hands from his pockets and gestured toward the prosecution's table. His voice didn't rise, but it landed heavy. "Because Officer Ruiz never saw me in that car. In fact, he wasn't even on duty when the pursuit began." Carrington's composure wavered, just a little. "Excuse me, I'd like to file a motion to retrieve Officer Ruiz's GPS data from that night," Yolan said, taking another step. "If he was truly present at the time and place he claimed, then his location logs will confirm it. But ... He let the word linger like smoke. "Something tells me they won't." The room stirred. Quiet murmurs swept through the gallery like a breeze through dry grass. Grayson looked toward the prosecution. Carrington cleared his throat, the edges of his mask starting to fray. Your Honor, that report came from a certified officer of the law. Are we really entertaining the word of a defendant over an officer's sworn account? Yalin shrugged calmly, almost amused. If the officer was where he said he was, then the records will support him, but if he wasn't, he let it trail again, not needing to say the rest. Grayson watched Yolin carefully, then looked to Carrington. Does the state object to a review of the GPS logs? A beat of silence. Carrington didn't answer right out, and that pause was all it took. The jury noticed, so did the gallery, and most importantly, so did the judge. Yolin didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Years of watching trials had taught him everything he needed to know. When a prosecutor stalls, it's rarely about procedure, it's about panic. Grayson exhaled slowly, rubbing at his temple. Counselor Carrington finally gave a curt shake of his head. No objection, Your Honor. But the shift had already begun. The courtroom, once filled with smug chuckles and confident glances, now held something colder, stillness. People were no longer laughing, they were listening. Carrington fumbled slightly as he shuffled his papers, trying to regain his footing. Regardless of that detail, he said, voice tightening. The defendant's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel of a stolen vehicle. That hasn't changed. Yalin nodded, expression unreadable. That's true, he said. But let's take a closer look at that, shall we? Grayson gestured for him to proceed. Jalin turned, facing the jury now, letting his gaze sweep from one face to the next. The prosecution wants you to believe that my fingerprints inside a car automatically mean I stole it. But let's apply some basic logic. He paused for a breath, speaking with the kind of composure you'd expect from a seasoned litigator, not a teenager in court for his freedom. Imagine you walk into a store, he continued. You try on a jacket, maybe you stick your hands in the pockets. You zip it up, then you put it back and leave. Later that day, someone shoplifts that same jacket. Are you guilty, just because your prints are on it? The jury glanced among themselves. A few people in the gallery murmured softly. Yalin didn't wait for the reaction to settle. The car, he said, was parked outside a 7-Eleven the night before it was reported stolen. I was inside that store with 3 friends. And yes, when we left, we passed the car. I leaned on it. The door was already unlocked. I opened it just for a moment. I didn't drive it. I didn't steal it. I didn't even sit in it. Just a dumb, curious second. He let that truth settle in the silence. Then, with a calm that cut sharper than shouting ever could, he asked, does touching something make you a criminal? Carrington flipped through his notes, pretending to be in control, but the pages rustled too loudly now. His movements rushed. Yalin was unraveling the story and everyone knew it. And while we're on the topic of evidence, Yalin added, turning back to Grayson, was the forensic analyst who processed that fingerprint data subpoenaed to testify today. Grayson blinked, clearly caught off guard. His gaze shifted to Carrington. After a pause, the prosecutor muttered, no. Yalin tilted his head slightly. So let me get this straight. The prosecution wants to use forensic evidence to convict me, but didn't bring the person who actually handled that evidence. No opportunity for cross-examination, no way to verify the chain of custody or lab accuracy. Carrington's jaw locked again. Yalin watched him for a moment, then gave a single, slow nod. Interesting. Judge Grayson let out a long sigh, rubbing the bridge of his nose. His face had shifted now, annoyed, but wary. This case wasn't turning out to be the simple conviction he'd expected. In Yalin, he was only getting started. What Yalin was about to reveal would shift the room in ways no objection could stop. He took a measured step forward, his voice steady, edged with quiet force. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce a piece of evidence the prosecution chose not to submit. Judge Grayson raised an eyebrow. Go on, Yalin nodded once. A signed statement from the vehicle's owner, Mr. Raymond Whitaker, the registered owner of the Audi in question. Grayson's brow furrowed. The owner? Yes, sir, Yalin replied. Mr. Whitaker gave a statement to the police the night his car went missing, but somehow it never made it into the prosecution's file. He turned his gaze to Carrington, voice tightening just slightly. Do you remember what he told the officers that night? Carrington didn't answer. He didn't need the tension in his jaw said everything. Jalin didn't wait. He pulled a printed transcript from his file, held it up for the judge, and began to read. I left the car running while I ran into the gas station. Must have been some kid who jumped in and took off. But it wasn't the guy they arrested. I saw the kid, he was white. The courtroom reacted as one. A ripple of disbelief, audible gasps. Whispers turned into a hum of shock. Jalin held the page up high. This is from the original police report, the same report the prosecution pretended didn't exist. He faced the judge again, his voice unwavering. The arresting officer left this out of his testimony. The prosecution ignored it. And yet, they expect this jury to believe I'm guilty, despite the fact that I don't even match the description of the actual suspect. Carrington stepped forward, scrambling for footing. Your Honor, that's irrelevant. The defendant was later found in possession of no Yolan cut in, not loud, but sharp. His words sliced clean through the courtroom noise. I was not in possession of anything. I was walking home, with snacks in my hand, blocks away from where the car was dumped. I wasn't near the vehicle. I wasn't fleeing. I wasn't hiding. I was just walking. He let that hang in the room for a beat, then added, the only thing connecting me to this crime is sloppy police workhand assumption. Judge Grayson leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple, the weight of the moment sinking deep into his expression. The cracks in the case were now gaping holes. Yolan turned back to the jury, his voice steady but loaded with everything he'd held back until now. The real thief got away that night. The police didn't find him. They found a black kid in the area and decided that was close enough. A silence fell that no one dared to break. Grayson cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses like they suddenly didn't fit. Does the prosecution have anything further to add? Carrington stood rigid, flushed and defeated. No, Your Honor. The judge sighed, long and low. He looked at Yolan, then at the jury, then back again. Finally, he leaned forward and spoke, the words that would echo long after the gavel struck. Case dismissed. For a moment, there was no sound at all. Just stillness. Then the room erupted. Some gasped, some cheered, others sat frozen. Reporters scrambled for their notebooks. Half the gallery stood to see better. The bailiff glanced around like he wasn't sure what to do next, but Yolan, he didn't move. He stood still, letting the verdict settle over the room like dust after a storm. Then slowly he turned toward the exit. Judge Grayson was still gripping his gavel, eyes locked on the young man walking away, and in his gaze, just faintly, was something that hadn't been there before. Recognition, maybe even respect, possibly regret. Mr. Dawson, the judge called out. Yolan paused near the door, but didn't turn around. Grayson hesitated, then said, you should consider law school. A small smirk played at the corner of Jalen's mouth. Consider it. He'd already decided years ago. Outside, the courthouse steps were swarmed with voices and cameras. Reporters leaned over barricades, their microphones snapping forward like knives. Yolan, did you expect the case to be thrown out? How does it feel to outplay a veteran prosecutor? What are you going to do next? Yolan stepped down the stairs, steady, silent, unreadable, because he already knew the answer. Yolan tugged his hoodie up, shadowing his face as the crowd pressed in around him. Reporters called his name. Cameras snapped like firecrackers, but he kept walking. The noise, the chaos, it didn't matter. This wasn't about headlines or clever comebacks. This was about something deeper. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, his mother stood waiting. Denise, arms folded, jaw set. Her eyes locked on him like she was trying to see beneath the skin, searching for something only a mother would know. For a second, she didn't move. Then she let out a shaky breath and muttered, boy, you just about gave me a heart attack. Yolan chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Had to do what I believed in, Ma. She held his eyes for another moment, then pulled him into her arms, holding him tight. You always were hard-headed, she said into his shoulder, just like your father. Up on the steps, the cameras still flashed, but Yolan didn't even glance their way. His attention drifted across the street where Judge Grayson stood beside his car, watching. The judge's stance had shifted, no longer stiff, no longer smug. His eyes followed Yolan, not with judgment but something quieter, something closer, to respect or maybe regret. He'd walked into that courtroom thinking it was another routine case. One more name, one more file, an easy win. But what Yolan had done couldn't be filed away, because today, the system got challenged and for once, it flinched. That's what stuck with him, not the argument, not the evidence. The mirror Yolan held up to it and the truth staring back, and now, the question that hung in the air, like smoke. How many others hadn't gotten this chance? How many names were buried in court transcripts and case folders? How many lives derailed, not by guilt, but by assumption, by laziness, by prejudice, by a machine that was never designed to protect everyone equally? Yolan had the words. He had the will. But what about the ones who didn't? This wasn't just about one trial. It was a wake-up call. And he knew now that courtroom wouldn't be the last one he stepped into. But next time, he wouldn't be standing at the defense table. He'd be the one fighting from the other side. The one holding the law in his hands, not defending himself against it. And when that day came, he wouldn't be alone. Because if this story made you stop even for a second, then maybe the change has already begun.